Hello everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are here to binge the entire Maiden Lane series by Elizabeth Hoyt. I almost dropped these books. There are so many. I am so excited to do this reading vlog. I've been having a really good time lately with just binging book series in general. I binged the entire Bridgerton series recently. The reading vlog for that will be linked up in the cards above. And I'm going to blame Jen and Crystal for my wanting to binge this series because they've been reading all of the books and just raving and raving about all of them. So I thought that I would just kind of quickly show you all of the books that I own. I own the first 9 books of the series, and as far as I know, there are 13 books total. So it's gonna be a long vlog. Definitely go get a snack and sit back and relax because yeah, there's a lot going on in this vlog. So I'll just show you the first 9 books that I own physically, and then in terms of the later books in the series, I'll show you the covers for those as I read them during this vlog. So first we have Wicked Intentions, book 1. Book 2 is Notorious Pleasures. Then we have Scandalous Desires. I just love these covers and the step back so much. They are beautiful. Thief of Shadows is after that. Book 5 is Lord of Darkness. Then we have Duke of Midnight, Darling Beast, then Dearest Rogue. And the last one that I own a physical copy of is Sweetest Scoundrel. So let me just quickly explain to you while I'm putting these books back in their place. Let me quickly explain to you what this series is about. You know, just like with most historical romance book series, you could technically read all of these as standalones, but there is kind of an overarching plot going on throughout the entirety of this series. So what's going on is this takes place in St. Giles, which is, I don't know about nowadays, but back then, this series starts in 1737, so I think the Georgian era. But back then, St. Giles was a very dangerous place to live, and there was a lot of poverty going on. So there is this ghost of St. Giles who is a masked vigilante. He fights crime, specifically in this area. And so this series essentially follows the different people that take on the persona of the ghost of St. Giles throughout the series, because it's not just one person who's the ghost of St. Giles. I think there's several people who take on that persona as we go along in the series. So let's do an actual reading update. So Wicked Intentions, book 1, I am on page 127. That is just about 33% of the way through, so I have about that much left of the book. And so this one is about our main characters, Lazarus, who is Lord Care. He is searching for the person who murdered his mistress. And then we have Temperance, who helps run this home for orphan children with her brother Winter. We also see glimpses of her younger sibling Silence, who actually, her book is Scandalous Desire. She's the main character in this one. Oddly enough, I read this one way back in August of 2020, but I'm just gonna reread it so I get the continuity of the series. So yeah, basically, Lord Care, or Lazarus, and Temperance strike up this bargain that she will be his guide in St. Giles to help him find this murderer. In exchange for that, he will introduce her to wealthy people that could potentially sponsor this home for orphan children that she runs, because they are definitely in financial trouble at the moment. So I'm really enjoying this so far. Something that I find interesting is while Lazarus is a very typical Elizabeth Hoyt kind of hero, he's dark and brooding, a grumpier hero, he's got secrets, but at the same time he has this reputation of having scandalous sexual proclivities, and I'm getting the sense that maybe he's into BDSM. But yeah, I'm having a good time with this one so far. I will definitely update you guys tomorrow at some point when I finish this one. Unfortunately, I might have to pause my filming of this reading vlog for maybe a day or so, because I'm still waiting for the audiobook for Notorious Pleasures, which is book 2, to come in from my Libby app, which is the app that my library uses for audiobooks and ebooks and things like that. So yeah, with that being said, I will update you guys at some point tomorrow. Hey guys, so it is Tuesday. It is just about 1 p.m. and I did finish Wicked Intentions by Elizabeth Hoyt actually just a few minutes ago. And so I am giving this 4 stars. I thought that this was a very, very solid start to the Maiden Lane series. Sometimes you just want a really dark and gritty historical romance, and this series is just so perfect for that. So I do want to say that for a good chunk of this book though, I wasn't all that convinced about the romance between Temperance and Lazarus, because for me, Lazarus's character was just very stagnant. Like, he was so dark and broody and holding all of his secrets in that he wasn't growing at all, and he wasn't letting Temperance in at all as to who he really is. And so I was definitely getting frustrated and I wasn't into the romance. But by the last, I don't know, I'd say like 25% of this book, he really does start to open up to her. And he also kind of forces her to open up in a way that I didn't expect. So I thought that that was really interesting, and by the end of it, I was into their romance. Also, I think it's very interesting following a hero like Lazarus who has touch aversion. I haven't really read many books that have that other than like the Six of Crows duology with Kaz Brecker. And it was really cool to see him and Temperance work through that throughout this book. And something else that I have been enjoying about this series, because like I said, I read Scandalous Desires at some point last year, so I already knew that this was a thing. But it's cool that we get snippets of other people's POVs. Like in this book, we get Silence's point of view, who is Temperance's younger sister. And I think I mentioned this in my last update. Silence is the main character of Scandalous Desires. And so it was really great to see her point of view and see her part of the story that is leading up to her own book and romance and all of that. All right, everyone, so it is the next day. It's Wednesday. It's just about 2:30 p.m. I'm actually getting ready to go to work in about 30 minutes or so. I have some voice lessons to teach on Wednesdays, but I am so happy because late last night I did get the audiobook in for Notorious Pleasures, which, like I said, is book 2 in the Maiden Lane series. So I am on page 127, which is just about like 34% of the way through this book. Something else that I wanted to mention about just the series in general that I forgot to talk about yesterday is the ghost of St. Giles himself. I find it very interesting that this vigilante wears like a Harlequin costume. I'll put a picture of what that kind of costume looks like. I just feel like it's very conspicuous. I don't know. I assumed that this kind of vigilante would be wearing like all black, like something to where they can easily, I don't know, run through the streets at night and not really be noticed, but he's clearly wearing like, I think they described it as like a red and black Harlequin motley outfit with like a black half mask, I think, that has like a huge protruding nose. Like, I just feel like that's kind of crazy and really obvious. I'm excited to get to the book where we get the romance of the ghost of St. Giles, because I'd be curious to know like what his mindset and his thinking was in terms of using that kind of costume in terms of being a vigilante. But anyways, we are on this book. This is book 2, like I said. We are following Lady Hero Batten. We met her in the first book, actually. And Lady Hero is a patroness of the home for orphan children that Temperance, the heroine from the first book, was running with her younger brother, Winter. And now that Temperance is married, Silence, their younger sibling, who is the main character in this book, this is the 3rd book in the series, Silence is now running the home with Winter still. And so the hero of the story is Griffin Remington, Lord Reading, and the tea is that Lady Hero is actually engaged to his brother, who is a marquis. And so you know there's going to be angst and drama with all of that. Where I left off, we have already seen the two of them share a passionate kiss. Things are happening that maybe shouldn't be happening. And it's also interesting because we do get the POV of Thomas, who's the marquis that she is engaged to, and we're seeing that he has some complicated entanglements with this woman Lavinia. So I'm interested to see like what their past is. And then also apparently Griffin seduced Thomas's first wife. So there's just all kinds of family drama, romantic drama going on for sure. I think I'm gonna wait to start Scandalous Desires until tomorrow morning because I'm actually working on another book at the moment. This is very unusual for me, but I am reading 2 books at the moment. The other book that I'm working on is After Midnight by Teresa Medeiros. So this is a book that unfortunately there is no audiobook for. So I have been slowly but surely working my way through this one when not reading one of the Maiden Lane books or another audiobook. I'm about 60% of the way through this book and I'm really enjoying it so far. I'm not gonna go too in depth about what's going on with this book, but this is the book that I mentioned in my May TBR, that it's about a Viscount who may or may not be a vampire. And it's really interesting so far. I hope that there are actual paranormal elements going on because the way that it's written, I feel like it could go either way, to where like there's actually nothing paranormal going on, but then at the same time maybe there is a vampire involved. You know, we just don't know. I'm also reading this because this is the May pick for the Rake Appreciation Society book club that Jen and Crystal run on here on YouTube. I'm gonna link both of their channels down in the description below. Funny enough, they are the same booktubers that motivated me to binge this entire series. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm here with a reading update, but first things first, I keep forgetting to do this, but I need to show you guys the step backs of these books because they are just absolutely stunning. So this is Wicked Intentions book 1. And my goodness, like Elizabeth Hoyt gets the most stunning step backs, and I'm also obsessed with double page step back art. And then here's Notorious Pleasures, which is the book that I finished last night. Beautiful step back as well. I love this whole like boat scene going on. And then the book that I'm currently working on in the series is Scandalous Desires, with the best step back ever. Like, come on, bathtub scene, like, so good. So in terms of a reading update, like I said, I finished this last night, book 2. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. I enjoyed the drama. I think I touched on this in my last update. There's just a lot of family drama going on with both the hero and the heroine. I just wasn't quite feeling the romance, and I think it's because I wasn't quite feeling either main characters. Griffin to me was just fine. Like, he's a solid rake type of hero, and then our heroine, whose name is Hero, she was odd to me because I feel like, I know that Crystal talked about this in her Goodreads review as well, because she gave this one 3 stars. I think this is her least favorite of the series as well. She talked about how she found it odd that Hero, I don't know, she kind of claims to be this virtuous woman and of high moral standing, but at the same time she didn't think twice really about cheating on her fiance with Griffin. I don't mean to judge her for her choices, but it's just the fact that I feel like she kept claiming to be a woman of such high moral ground when she really isn't. I don't know. So I just didn't quite love these 2 main characters, and so because of that I wasn't invested or like emotionally attached to their romance. Like, it was just fine. We meet Phoebe, who is the younger sister to Hero, our heroine, and she ends up being the main character in Dearest Rogue, which I think is book 8 in the series. And so we're seeing in this book that her eyesight is getting worse and worse. And well, we see in her book, in book 8, that she eventually does become blind. And so that's very interesting, but also very heartbreaking to see as well. So there were things that I liked about this, but at the same time didn't love it by any means. Then Scandalous Desires book 3, I'm currently on page 175. That is chapter 9. I'm just about halfway. So I'm enjoying this just as much as I did the first time that I read it. It was a solid 4-star read for me, and I see it being a solid 4-star for me this time as well. This one is about a river pirate, Mickey O'Connor, and then Silence, who is the youngest of the siblings that include Temperance, who was the heroine from book 1, and then I've also mentioned Winter, who runs that orphan home with Silence at this point. There's a few more siblings in this family as well, so I'm curious to see if they all get their own romances throughout this series or not. But we saw in books 1 and 2, Silence's story and journey with Mickey. Like, they have quite the complicated history with one another. Now, she has essentially been forced to live with Mickey because she's been actually taking care of his child, his daughter, for the past year. And so Mickey has these very powerful enemies, namely this man known as the Vicar. He is a very dangerous man in St. Giles. And so because Mickey has this very strong and powerful enemy, he feels that the life of Mary, his daughter, and Silence are both threatened. And so he wants them living with him. And so things go on from there. There's a lot of really adorable things going on in this book as well. There's a dog named Lad that is just so freaking cute. And then it's really funny because anytime Mickey walks into the room when Mary, his daughter, who's like maybe 2 years old at this point, she's definitely a toddler, anytime he walks into the room, she just yells out, "Bad!" Like, that's how she knows him, as just bad. And I think that's absolutely hilarious. So yeah, I'm enjoying this. It's a good time. I love that this series just has so many morally gray characters, especially the heroes, but also the heroines. Especially in this book, the heroine was making some questionable choices, and I find that to be very intriguing and interesting. Also, I do want to say that after reading like 2.5 books of the series at this point, I am not the most convinced that you need to read these first 2 books to fully enjoy the series. As it stands right now, in my opinion, I think you could just start with book 3 and then read the rest of the series, because I feel like the series is really starting to get good with this series, whereas, I mean, well, with this book. Whereas with these 2 books, I mean, I enjoyed Wicked Intentions. I did think that it set up the world of St. Giles really well, and we got to see a lot of the ghosts of St. Giles for sure. I'm still not the most convinced that you absolutely need to read this book, but I did have a good time with it. And with this one, also something that I didn't love is that we only got to see the ghosts of St. Giles like in one scene, I want to say, and it was like for a millisecond. It was like a very short thing, and we have gotten a really interesting scene in this book, Scandalous Desires, with the ghost of St. Giles. I already know who the ghost of St. Giles is because I've read this book before, and at the end of this book is when it's revealed who the ghost of St. Giles actually is. Part of me is a little sad that I already knew going into these books, but at the same time, it's been kind of fun looking for foreshadowing, looking for clues as to who this vigilante actually is. So yeah, having a good time with that. I am also 80% of the way through with After Midnight by Teresa Medeiros. I am really enjoying this. This is the book that's about the Viscount who may or may not be a vampire, and I'm happy to report that this is actually a paranormal historical romance. I was really concerned when I was reading this that the author was just gonna kind of cop out and it was just going to be a normal historical romance. I'm so here for it. Adrian, the hero, is just so magnetic and intriguing. I'm obsessed with him. I also really enjoy Caroline, the main character. There's just a lot of really interesting things going on in this book. So yeah, I'm definitely going to finish this one at some point tonight as well. So that is going to be it for this reading update, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow when I get started on Thief of Shadows, which is book 4. All right, happy Friday, everyone. I'm here with my Sonic Diet Cherry Limeade, living my best life. I just got back actually from walking at the park with my dog Chloe and my mom. So I have a reading update for you guys with Maiden Lane. So I finished Scandalous Desires, which is book 3. First of all, it is crazy how much I forgot happened in this book. Like, sometimes it just makes me wonder, do I actually retain what I read? Like, there are some scenes and some books that live in my head rent-free, and then other books not so much. I did give this 4 stars the first time that I read it. I'm also giving it 4 stars now. There are some truly iconic moments in this book. Oh my god, particularly there is a scene where the ghost of St. Giles kind of saves the day at the end of this book. It's pretty epic in my opinion. I will say this time around, I feel like it took me a bit longer to root for Mickey and Silence to be together. I didn't really remember, I guess, how long it took Mickey to truly apologize and atone for what he did to Silence in previous books, namely the first book, Wicked Intentions. We see how all of their history came to be. It is all recapped in this book. So like I said in my last update, I personally don't think you absolutely need to read books in one and two. I think you could just jump into the series with this book and be fine. But yeah, once Mickey like fully apologized and was remorseful for what he did to Silence, I do feel like their romance developed a lot more and it was more believable. I definitely started to root for them. Yeah, just a really good time overall. So I am about 40% of the way through Thief of Shadows, which is book 4. So I'm on page 145, that's chapter 8. So this book, I've already talked a little bit about what's going on in this book, but we are getting the romance of the man who is the ghost of St. Giles. I'm not going to say who it is because I don't want to spoil anything. I don't even know how I want to refer to his character because I can't use his name. I think I'm just going to refer to him as Giles. I think we can all be okay with that. So yes, we have our hero Giles. At the very beginning of the book, he is the ghost of St. Giles. He gets very gravely injured. Lady Isabel Beckenhall comes across him while she's traveling through St. Giles. And so there is a nursing back to health trope going on at the very beginning. And I am just absolutely obsessed. And I knew that I was going to be going into this, but Giles himself is such a swoony character because he's so serious. I don't know, he just cares so much for the people around him, not only family, but the people he works with. And I mentioned this in an earlier update, he is a virgin hero as well. All of those things together just make him a very swoony hero for me personally. I also really love the dynamic between Isabel and Giles. Like I said, he is pretty serious, but Isabel kind of gets him out of his shell, and something about Isabel makes him want to tease her and provoke her in return. So it's very entertaining. Also, we have a reverse My Fair Lady / Pygmalion trope going on because Giles himself, basically because of his job, he needs to be tutored in the ways of aristocrats. Manners, etiquette, dancing, things that aristocrats have been raised in their whole lives. Otherwise his job is in jeopardy basically, and so Isabel is also coaching him on how to be a gentleman, and it's just such a fun time. Absolutely loving this book. I also want to quickly mention that Isabel is a widow heroine, which I personally really love romances about widows because in this time, this is the Georgian era, I think I've mentioned that too, so this is like the late 1730s in London. Widows always had more freedoms than unmarried single women, so I think that that adds something just fun and interesting to the stories as well. And I think it also makes sense to have a widow or having a more experienced heroine to match up with Giles, who is, like I said, a virgin. So I'm loving this. I'm absolutely obsessed, and I think that's gonna be it for my update for now. Oh, I wanted to quickly mention, last night I finished After Midnight by Teresa Medeiros. I gave this 5 stars. I need more paranormal historical romances in my life, so if you guys have recommendations, please leave them down in the comments below. That's going to be it for this update, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. All right, happy Saturday, everybody. It's just about 11:20 a.m. on Saturday, and I have a reading update, of course. So I finished Thief of Shadows last night, and oh my goodness, this was just as amazing as everybody said it was going to be. With this book, I am seeing that this series is getting really good because I am more than halfway through the next book, Lord of Darkness, and this is almost just as amazing as this book was, in my opinion. Words cannot describe how obsessed I was with Giles, our hero. Wow, there were so many epic and iconic moments throughout this book. There's literally a sword fight in an opera house that Giles has with a Viscount. Like, it was just so freaking amazing. Also, I love that in this book we have Giles, who is a very straight-laced hero. He almost lives like a very priestly kind of life. I mean, he is a virgin until he gets together with Isabel, and so I love seeing a straight-laced hero lose control and like really fall for the heroine. Like, it's just so good. I will say, as much as I enjoyed Isabel's character, I did get frustrated with her at times because she was so reluctant to like fully commit herself to Giles at times. And I understand why she was behaving the way that she was. Also, content warning for miscarriage. She talks about how she suffered 4 miscarriages, and that's really how she discovered how she is barren, unfortunately. And I really like how that subject matter was dealt with in particular. But that's kind of one of the reasons why she's so reluctant to commit herself to Giles, because she knows that she can never provide children for him. So that reasoning I do understand, but then there's other reasons that she tells him as far as like why she would never marry him. And I'm just like, girl, he is literally perfect. Like, what is your problem? If I met a man like Giles, I would throw myself into his arms very willingly. Okay, so this one, Lord of Darkness, book 5. This is a marriage in trouble story, which, if you don't already know that about me, that is my absolute favorite romance trope. We're following Godric Sinjin, who is another ghost of St. Giles. I feel fine spoiling that because there wasn't as big of a build up to this reveal as there was in this book. And then we have Lady Margaret Redding. So they got married a couple of years before. It was a marriage of convenience because she got pregnant by her lover that she planned to marry, but he actually got murdered in St. Giles. And the ghost of St. Giles actually has been long believed to be the murderer of her lover. And so now she is seeking vengeance on the ghost of St. Giles. Basically, Godric agreed to marry her because she was pregnant with that man's child, so that would have ruined her reputation. And then also Margaret's older brother blackmailed Godric into marrying Margaret. Basically he was like, I'm gonna tell everybody that you're the ghost of St. Giles if you don't marry her. So that's what happened. So they've been living completely separate lives for the past couple of years. I'm currently on page 200, that's chapter 11. That's just about like 55% of the way through, so I have this chunk to read. And then in terms of continuing on with the series, I am contemplating reading a book of a different genre. Just as a palate cleanser, I'm contemplating reading something else that's on my TBR. I have a couple of things kind of floating around in my mind, but I'll definitely update you guys about that in my next update. All right, hey guys, so it is Monday actually. It's just about 3 p.m. I'm getting ready to film a couple of videos, and so I thought it was definitely well past time for an update. So I actually took a little bit of a break from the Maiden Lane series on Sunday, yesterday, which was Mother's Day, so happy Mother's Day to all of you out there. I actually decided to read 2 books that are very different from this series. So the first book that I read was Slave to Sensation by Nalani Singh. This is a paranormal romance series. It's the first book in the Psy Changeling series by her. And I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I'm gonna get into my reviews of these 2 books in my mid-month wrap-up, which will most likely be posted well before this vlog, because I have a feeling that it's going to take me a million years to film and edit and upload this. But yeah, so enjoyed that one. And then late last night, I finished Barbarian Mine by Ruby Dixon. This is book 4 in her Ice Planet Barbarian series. I have been sort of binging this series a bit this month. I've read books 2, 3, and now 4. And I am just having such a fun time with this smutty alien sci-fi romance series. So back to Maiden Lane. So on Saturday, I want to say Saturday afternoon, I finished Lord of Darkness. I ended up giving this 4 stars. I enjoyed the romance. I will say it took me a while to be convinced of it, because both Godric and Margaret, there was just so much miscommunication between the 2 of them. And I wanted them to open up to each other earlier on in the book than they actually did. That's my main issue with the romance in general. So unfortunately, this isn't my favorite marriage in trouble trope ever, but it was still a very solid romance. Again, like I said, Godric is one of the ghosts of St. Giles. It was really entertaining to follow him and his crime fighting and all of that. So yeah, just like a really solid installment. I don't have much more to add. Oh, I will say there were some really steamy scenes, so we love to see that. And then in terms of the next book, which is Duke of Midnight, this is book 6. We are now following Maximus Batten, who is the Duke of Wakefield, and he is another ghost of St. Giles. This book in particular really reminds me of Batman because both of his parents were murdered in St. Giles when I want to say he was a teenager. I think he was like 13 or 14. And then he has a butler whose name is Craven, who definitely gives me Alfred vibes. He also has kind of a bat cave thing going on. It's like a cellar where he trains and practices and has like all of his weapons and things like that. And so then our heroine is Artemis, who is a lady's companion to her cousin Penelope. And at this point, she's had a couple of run-ins with the ghost of St. Giles. She's figured out that Maximus is the ghost himself. And so we have a romance about class differences because we have Maximus, who's a duke, and then we have Artemis, who is a lady's companion. She's not really an aristocrat, although her brother Apollo is a viscount, but he was accused of murdering 3 people, and so he was put in an asylum, Bedlam specifically. And so because of that, I guess she's no longer a member of the aristocracy either. I'm still like a little bit confused about everything that happened, but I think that things are going to make more and more sense as we go along in the story. So I'm on page 119, that is chapter 7, and that's about the 33% mark. So I have this last chunk of the book to read. So yeah, that is going to be it for this reading update. All right, hey guys, happy Wednesday. I did not feel the need to update this vlog yesterday, but I now have 3 books to talk about. So, what was it? Monday? Yes, Monday night I finished Duke of Midnight. I gave this 4 stars. I thought it was a very, very solid installment to the series. Like I said in my last update, this one is definitely the closest to the Batman story, and I really enjoyed that for sure. I enjoyed the romance a lot between Artemis and Maximus, our Duke of Midnight. They definitely had chemistry, but in my opinion, I didn't really believe that these 2 characters desperately loved each other by the end. I will say I could see how the 2 of them could get to that point at some point in their future. I just felt like the romance was a bit rushed in regards to the 2 of them confessing their love for each other and getting them to their happily ever after and all of that. To me, their relationship was almost solely based on the physical aspect, if that makes sense. And so that's another reason why I didn't truly believe that these 2 people desperately loved each other, but still enjoyed it, gave it 4 stars, very solid. So then yesterday I read the entirety of Darling Beast. So this one is about Apollo, who is the twin brother of Artemis, the heroine from this book. He was put into Bedlam, which is an asylum, for 4 years, I think. Basically, he was framed for murder. And so because he's an aristocrat, he's a viscount. Back then, members of the aristocracy didn't suffer the same consequences for really heinous crimes that commoners did. So instead of him getting the death penalty or anything like that, he was put into Bedlam. And so now he's actually mute because when he was in the asylum, he was beaten up very, very badly, and so his throat was severely damaged and now he can't really speak. And then our heroine is Lily Stump, who is London's premier actress. The 2 of them end up meeting because essentially they're both living at this pleasure garden that burned down. This one I ended up giving 3.5 stars. I definitely really enjoyed it. There were a lot of ingredients in this book that made me think I was going to adore it. You know, we have the broken, mute hero, although I will say throughout the book he does eventually find his voice again. It's not permanently damaged. And then we have an actress heroine. I myself am an actress, so I really enjoyed that. We also have Lily has a 7-year-old son named Indio, and he was adorable. And they also have this really adorable little Italian greyhound named Daffodil. Just a lot of great ingredients, but at the end of the day, for whatever reason, I couldn't fully emotionally connect to these 2 main characters. I don't know why that is. I don't know. I believed their romance. I definitely believed that the 2 of them fell in love with one another, but I didn't care all that much about them, and I hate saying that. So unfortunately for me, this was one of the weaker installments of the series. I still think it's a solid book, but it just didn't work for me as well as I wanted it to. So there's that one. And then Dearest Rogue, which is book 8 in the series. I just started this one this morning. I am now on page 112, that is chapter 7, and about 34% of the way through. Now this is a fan favorite of the series, and for a very good reason. We are finally getting the story of Lady Phoebe. She was a character that was introduced all the way back in book 2, if you can recall my updates from that book. She was the younger sister of the heroine from that book. And we saw in that installment that she was slowly starting to go blind, and in this book, towards the very beginning, we see that now she sees absolutely nothing. Her vision is completely black, and that is very devastating for her because it's been such a gradual thing over the years, and now she realizes that there's no recovering from this, you know, and that would be very devastating for anybody. And then the hero is Captain James Trevelyan. He is essentially her bodyguard, a bit of a Grump Sunshine trope going on, just having a really good time. Basically, somebody is after Lady Phoebe. We don't know who or why, but we have now had 2 attacks where several men just show up and they're trying to take her away. I totally see why this is such a fan favorite. I've always enjoyed Phoebe's character, and so I was very pumped to see her get her own book. And so far it is living up to all of the hype and more, in my opinion. So I'll definitely go more into my thoughts about this book once I finish it, because like I said, I'm not even halfway through the book right now. But all right, hey guys, what's up? Today has been an odd day, to say the least. It's Friday. I work at a dance studio that also has music and acting classes and things like that, and so we've been gearing up for our yearly showcase, which is supposed to be tomorrow. And so today was supposed to be our dress rehearsal, and so I got all dolled up. I was like halfway through doing my makeup because I'm performing in the showcase. And then I get this text from my boss that we are postponing showcase because some kids have gotten COVID. So there's that. I also want to note that our state lifted the mask mandate a couple of weeks ago, so that's just been messing everything up, basically. So I had my makeup half done for that, and I was like, okay, like all dressed up and nowhere to go. So I figured I might as well film today while I have my makeup done. So there's that. I'm getting ready to film my mid-May wrap up, but first I thought I would do an update for this vlog. So I have 2 books to talk about. First of all, we have Dearest Rogue, which is book 8 in the series. This is a fan favorite for sure, and for very good reason. I ended up giving it 5 stars. I really, really loved it. So I'm just gonna reference my Goodreads review and tell you guys some of the things that I adored about this book. First of all, we have a blind heroine who just wants to live her life. Phoebe is just such a fun and bubbly character. I love her so much, and I loved seeing her navigate her way through life while being blind, especially in a time like this. This is like the 1740s, I think, at this point, and like, people with any kind of disabilities were just not widely accepted, and nobody was trying to make life any easier for people like Phoebe with a disability like this. So yeah, we have James. He was a captain in like the police force, but his leg was injured very, very badly. I want to say either in Duke of Midnight or Darling Beast. I can't quite remember. And so now he is out of work, and so Phoebe's older brother, who is the Duke from Duke of Midnight, he has now hired James to be Phoebe's bodyguard. And there's also an age difference too, because Phoebe's like 21, I think, and James is around like 33. So there's a little bit of an age gap going on. Also a hero who thinks he's unworthy of the heroine. I love that trope. There's also the there's only one bed trope, and of course the bodyguard trope. So there's a lot of great things going on for sure in this one. So then I moved on to Sweetest Scoundrel. I did take a break yesterday from the Maiden Lane series. Once again, I just didn't want to get burnt out. So I read Alatsaway by Darcy Little Badger. which is a YA paranormal book about an indigenous family, essentially, and there's also a murder mystery involved, so it's a very different book from the Maiden Lane series, which is what I wanted. But Sweetest Scoundrel, we are now following Asa Makepeace, who is one of the Makepeace siblings, and then we have Eve Dinwoody, who is the half-sister of this man Valentine, who is the Duke of Montgomery. His story is going to be in the next book, I believe, which is Duke of Sin. He's a very interesting character. I'll get to him when I get to his book. But Eve is very much like a straight-laced blue stocking, and Ace is kind of a rake. He is the owner of this pleasure garden slash theater called Heart's Folly. In a previous book, it burned down, and so they're trying to rebuild it. This one's very solid. At the moment, I would give it 4 stars. I'm on page 157, that's chapter 9. That's almost halfway through the book, as you can see. What's enjoyable about this one is that, you know, he is building a theater and they're planning on showing operas there, and it's been really entertaining to see the different opera singers that are involved in this whole process, because I myself am an opera singer, and it's really interesting to see how opera singers behaved back then and how they were viewed by society and the aristocracy in general, because these singers were like coveted and they were celebrities. Everybody knew who they were. Whereas nowadays that's not really the case anymore. Of course there are famous opera singers nowadays, but the culture is just very, very different. And also back then, opera singers and actors and anybody of that kind of profession, they were deemed to be lower class, I guess you could say. It definitely didn't look good if a member of the aristocracy married an opera singer or an actress. They were usually the kind of women that members of the aristocracy would have affairs with and be mistresses, but not as wives. What I will say is that I've noticed with the past 3 books of this series, which is Darling Beast, and then, like I already talked about, Dearest Rogue and Sweetest Scoundrel, unfortunately, there is no Ghost of St. Giles going on in these books, and that's because all of the men that have been the Ghosts of St. Giles have now retired because they've found their happily ever afters in previous books. So that is something that's a little bit annoying to me, just because I love that aspect of the series so much, and I've loved reading the books from the 3 different men's POVs that have played the Ghost of St. Giles, and now they are no longer doing that. And so I'm interested to see if she's going to reincorporate that persona and that vigilante into the story. There's that. I did just want to touch on that, but yeah, that's going to be it for this reading update, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. All right, happy Monday, everybody. I think I've been filming this vlog for 2 weeks at this point. Wow. I've never filmed a vlog for this long, but I mean, I've had to read 12 books to complete this series, so I mean, I knew this was going to take me a while. By the way, I keep saying that there's 13 books in the series. There are 12. There are some novellas, but I don't plan on reading them. So I have 3 books to talk about. Let's first and foremost wrap up my thoughts about Sweetest Scoundrels, which is book 9. So this one is about Eve and Asa. I know I probably talked about the plot in my last update. It's been a couple of days. I don't think I did an update since Friday, and like I said, it's now Monday, but here we are. But I am going to quickly mention things that I really liked about this romance. First of all, I didn't expect much out of this one because Asa is just not a character that really interested me all that much, and Eve, we were introduced to her in Dearest Rogue, which was the previous book. She was fine. I had nothing against her character in that book, but these 2 characters pleasantly surprised me, and I really enjoyed their romance. So I'm just gonna kind of read a couple of things from my Goodreads review that I really enjoyed about this book. Ooh, their sex scenes were especially spicy. I noted that. I also liked that Eve is deathly afraid of dogs, basically because of something that happened in her past. And I loved that a random stray came into her life and helped her heal from that, because that always breaks my heart when people are afraid of dogs. And I totally understand why, but as someone who adores dogs like myself, like, that just made me sad. So I'm glad that she healed from that. I also loved that Asa loves theater and opera and all of those things so much. I mean, there's a reason why he owns a pleasure garden slash theater, right? Also, tons and tons of consent. I do want to say content warning for this one is sexual assault of a minor is discussed, and then also PTSD. This whole Maiden Lane series, I would say really you should check out the content warnings, because all of these books have some pretty dark things being discussed. Next, I went into Duke of Sin, which is book 10. This one is about Valentine, who is the Duke of Montgomery. He is such an intriguing and interesting character. I don't think I've ever read a hero quite like Valentine, because yes, he's kind of a villain, an anti-hero, which we all love those kinds of heroes in romance novels, right? But he also spies on people, blackmails people. He literally commits murder at some point throughout this book. Like, he's not a good person. And I also found it interesting because while he's all of these dark and twisted things, he's also like the dandiest dandy ever. If you're not familiar with that term, a dandy was a type of man back in this time period. This is the Georgian era, that was very meticulous about their appearance and dressed to the nines and very flamboyant colors and styles and all of those things. And he has this beautiful long golden hair. Like, he is very into himself. You know, I definitely agree that he could have gone through more character development and more of a redemption arc, but at the same time, if Elizabeth Hoyt would have done too much with that, it wouldn't have been believable. So I like that by the end of the book, he's still kind of an asshole. And what's interesting about this romance too is that it's with Bridget, who is his housekeeper. So we have the class difference romance trope. We also have the nursing back to health trope, because at one point in this book, Valentine becomes ill, and so Bridget has to nurse him back to health. Also some really good sex scenes, plus a really spicy bath scene in particular. I'm noticing as the books are going along, in my opinion, the sex scenes are getting better and better and better. Like, Elizabeth Hoyt is really coming into her own with writing those kinds of scenes, in my opinion. So yeah, gave this one 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. Then we are now moving on to Duke of Pleasure, which is book 11. So yesterday, I took a break from reading the Maiden Lane series. I read a couple of, I read like a YA contemporary and then a contemporary dark romance. And so I was definitely ready to jump back into the Maiden Lane series with this book, book 11. This one is amazing so far. I'm 30% of the way through, and I could definitely see myself giving this 5 stars. We have Hugh, who is the Duke of Fitzroy, I believe. He's a duke because he is an acknowledged bastard of the King of England. So he's a duke. And he is a widower. He has 2 young children. We have our heroine, Alf, who is a character that has been featured throughout most of this series. I can't remember. I want to say her character was introduced around Thief of Shadows, Lord of Darkness-ish, if I'm remembering that correctly. But she is 21, but she has been dressing up as a boy all of her life. She lives in St. Giles, and she works as kind of a messenger she was working for the Duke of Montgomery, and now she's kind of working for Hugh, the Duke of Fitzroy. And at this point, she is the Ghost of St. Giles. We have a female Ghost of St. Giles. It's everything. I'm already obsessed. I was dying because the very first scene is Hugh is getting attacked by some people, and so she shows up as the Ghost of St. Giles and helps him fight them. And like, literally the first thing that comes to his mind when he sees her as the Ghost of St. Giles is tits. Because he's never known the Ghost of St. Giles to be a woman. Nobody has. I just love that. Like, that made me die laughing. It's also iconic because once they were done fighting these bad men, like, she just straight up kisses him and then runs away. So I love these kinds of romances where one of the main characters has been disguised for a long time, or maybe all of their life. I am just so excited to see what happens when Hugh finally finds out who Alf actually is. There is also this plot line going on with the Lords of Chaos. This was introduced in Sweetest Scoundrels. It's the secret society of aristocratic men who do terrible and awful things. They get together for these like revelry meetings, and yeah, so now Hugh is tasked with bringing this group down. We saw a lot of them in Duke of Sin, which was the previous book as well, because Valentine's father was their leader. So yeah, there's a lot of drama going on with that for sure. But I'm already loving this because I love single parent romances. I love the dynamic between Alf and Hugh, and Hugh's 2 sons are absolutely adorable, Peter and Christopher. And we've already gotten a scene where Alf was bonding with his 2 sons, and it was just so freaking funny and adorable. Hi guys. I am so excited. We are here to wrap up the last 2 books of the series, and then I will talk about my thoughts on the series as a whole, and I'm going to rank all of the books, which was harder than I thought it was going to be. So to wrap up Duke of Pleasure, book 11, I adored this book. I had to give it 5 stars. I adored both Alf and Hugh so much. I'm just gonna reference my Goodreads review about why I loved this so much. We have a single parent with adorable kids. I am always a sucker for single parent romances, and this one was great. We also have a Pygmalion / My Fair Lady side plot, because essentially they need Alf to help them infiltrate a ball. They're trying to get information on the Lords of Chaos, which I think I've talked about them briefly before. And so in order for them to do that, they're gonna have to dress her up as a woman in a gown and all of that. And she's never ever worn women's clothes her entire life. And I just loved that, because we saw Iris, who is the heroine of the next book, Duke of Desire. She is giving Alf lessons on how to be a lady, and so she gives her dancing lessons and etiquette lessons, and that was just so much fun. We also have a hero and a heroine that are perfectly matched in every way. Like, there were some passages where Hugh would talk about why he's so attracted to her, and one of the things is that she's an amazing sword fighter. Like, he appreciates everything about her, and not every man, especially in this time period, would. Also, we have a female Ghost of St. Giles. I already talked about that. We've got sword fighting. I already just mentioned that, like, so good. So now we've got Duke of Desire, book 12, the final book of the series. I had a lot of expectations going into this book, and to be quite honest, I don't think it completely delivered. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. It's not a terrible book by any means, but it just wasn't my favorite. So this one is about Raphael. He is the new Duke of Dymor. His father, the old Duke, was a terrible person. He was the leader of the Lords of Chaos. He sexually assaulted Raphael when he was a child, and now Raphael has so much trauma because of that, and understandably so. And then we have Iris, who I just briefly mentioned in Duke of Pleasure. She was the woman that was supposed to marry Hugh, who was the Duke in that book, but basically, Raphael and Iris have a marriage of convenience at the very beginning of this book. This book frustrated me at times, because while I totally understand the trauma that Raphael was going through, it became very tedious and frustrating because he just kept pushing Iris away. She would try to be there for him and comfort him and try to, I don't know, learn more about him and try to bond with him, and he just wasn't having it. Also, one of the problems that they have throughout this book is that she desperately wants kids, but he doesn't, because he does not want to continue his father's bloodline, because he is convinced that if they have a child, their child would be a monster just like his father was. And you know what? In that time, I totally understand his thinking, but in connection with that, what was odd was that at the end of, like, the very end of the book, all of a sudden he had this change of heart and he was totally fine with having kids. And we didn't see any of that development. We were just told about it in the epilogue. I think that happens like 3 years later or something, maybe 5 years later. We're just told that all of a sudden he's fine with having kids. So to me, that was a bit unbelievable. I was just frustrated. So I gave this one 3.5 stars, unfortunately. Also, I was not satisfied with how the Lords of Chaos storyline ended in this book. I don't mind spoiling this for you guys, because it's really not that big of a deal in my opinion, but basically what happens is that Raphael kills the leader of the Lords of Chaos, and that magically dissolves the group. And what's dumb about that ending is that that same thing happened a couple books before. I think in Duke of Sin or Duke of Pleasure, the leader died, was murdered, but the group didn't dissolve. Obviously somebody else took over the leadership position, so I don't understand why this time that would cause the groups to dissolve. It just didn't make sense to me. Also, in general, the Lords of Chaos storyline, it's not my favorite because it's not as complex or intriguing as some of the other storylines throughout the rest of the series. Because with the Lords of Chaos, like, obviously these are terrible bad men and we need to take them down, and that's the end of it. There's nothing like interesting about it. It's just like, oh yeah, these are terrible people, they need to go. But yeah, to end my review on this specific book, I just want to say content warning for rape. child pornography and PTSD. This might be the darkest book of the series as well, so definitely be mindful of that before going in. Maybe I'll do my ranking first, and then I'll kind of get into my general thoughts about maybe my recommendations. Do I think you should read the entire series? All of that. So I'm gonna start from my least favorite and work my way up to my most favorite. So first we have Notorious Pleasures. You guys know my thoughts about this one. It just wasn't my favorite. Gave it 3.5 stars. Then we have, I'm gonna put Duke of Desire next. I also gave this 3.5 stars. I just talked about all my thoughts about why. Then the last 3.5 star book I have is Darling Beast. There is nothing wrong with this book, which is why it's the highest ranked of the 3 stars. For whatever reason, I didn't connect with the couple, but there's nothing wrong with this book. And I know a lot of people who love this one, so maybe take my review with a grain of salt. Then after that, I'm going to put Sweetest Scoundrel. Again, nothing wrong with this book. It just wasn't all that life-changing for me. Then we have Wicked Intentions. I enjoyed this one. You know, I'm getting into all my 4-star reads at this point, so a lot of these books I feel very similarly about, but in terms of ranking, I went with this one. And then after Wicked Intentions, I'm gonna go ahead and put Scandalous Desires. Had a really good time with this one. After Scandalous Desires, I think I'm gonna put Duke of Sin. I personally had a fun time with this one. I know Valentine is not the most likable hero, but for some reason I liked that about him. So then after Duke of Sin, I'm gonna go ahead and put Lord of Darkness. So now I'm getting into the books of the series that are the most like Batman, I would say, because we're getting into the books about people that are the Ghosts of St. Giles themselves. So yeah, Lord of Darkness. This wasn't my absolute favorite Marriage in Trouble story, but I did still think it was pretty solid. So yeah, this one. And then after that, I'm gonna put Duke of Midnight. This one is definitely the most like the Batman story. I had a fun time with it. Maybe I didn't believe the romance by the end, but I still liked them as a couple. Had a fun time. So now I'm getting into the 3 books that I gave 5 stars. So I'm gonna go with Dearest Rogue. Really had a fun time with this one. There's a reason it's a fan favorite. It's great. It's fantastic. Then my second favorite of the series is going to be Duke of Pleasure. I adored this book. I might have to buy myself a physical copy. We'll see. I might. And then my absolute favorite book of the series, and nobody's surprised, this is everybody's favorite, I think, is going to be Thief of Shadows. Need I say more? You guys know how much I love this book. So now just to talk about some general things that I really enjoyed about this series as a whole. I really love the morally gray and interesting characters. I think Elizabeth Hoyt does a really great job of developing her characters in general, and even though these characters aren't perfect by any means, a lot of them are still very likable. Something else I've noticed about the way that she writes a lot of these maiden lane books is that you may not be convinced about the romance throughout most of the book, but somehow by the end you root for it. I find that very interesting. There were quite a few books. Wicked Intentions comes to mind with that. Lord of Darkness. There's a couple of other books, Scandalous Desires. You know, these are all books that while I was reading them, I was like, I'm not really sure, but then by the end I was like, okay, I get it, you know? I also really enjoy that while all of these books can definitely be read as standalone, and I'm gonna get into my personal recommendations in a minute in terms of what books I think you should definitely read. What I really liked is that each final chapter of these books leads you to want to read the next book. It gives you just a taste of what the next characters are like and what the next storyline is like, and I think that that is just geniusly done. So the big question is, do I recommend that you read this entire series like I did? Yes and no, because it was fun to read from book 1 because you see characters from earlier books come back in the story and vice versa. You know, you're seeing characters from the later books, once they get their own books, featured a little bit in these earlier books, and that is fun to see for sure. It's also fun to see Elizabeth Hoyt's writing style change and to see her really get her footing with what direction she wants to take the series in. But in my opinion, I do not think you need to read Wicked Intentions or Notorious Pleasures. I personally think you will have a great time starting with book 3 and then reading on in the series. So I do have a few books of the series that I personally think are must reads, whereas the other books you can take or leave. It just depends on what you want to do. If you want to read the entire series, I think you'll have a good time like I did, but if you only want to read a few books of the series, these are the 5 that I'm going to suggest. So we have the 3 like middle books of the series, which is Thief of Shadows, Lord of Darkness, and Duke of Midnight. I recommend these 3 because these are most like Batman. They heavily feature the ghost of St. Giles himself. That's what I adore about this series the most. So I wholeheartedly recommend reading these 3 books. Then I also recommend reading Dearest Rogue, which is book 8. This does not really feature the ghost of St. Giles. However, the romance between Phoebe and James is everything. Like I said, I've said this many times, there's a reason this is a fan favorite. It's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, it's great. And then I wholeheartedly recommend reading Duke of Pleasure, which is book 11, because again, we get more Ghosts of St. Giles action. This was also fun because we got to see Godric from Lord of Darkness come back and act as a mentor for Alf when she was training to become the Ghost of St. Giles. And I think if you read the entire series like I did, there's gonna be plot lines that you enjoy more than others, just like I did. You know, this series changes quite a lot from book 1 to book 12. Like I said, the later books with the Lords of Chaos storyline, I didn't love that storyline as much as the Foundling Children home storyline. You know, something that I really wanted from the end of the series, specifically from book 12, was seeing like almost all of the main characters from previous books like make little cameo appearances. I think that would have been so much fun, and I think that would have been a great way to end the series on a high note. And you know, I've already said this, but something that also frustrates me about the later books, starting with, what is it, like book 7 with like Darling Beast, like with the exception of Duke of Pleasure, there's no more Ghost of St. Giles content, and that really frustrated me because I've said this so many times already throughout this vlog, but like that was my favorite part of the series, and the fact that she took that away from me makes me sad. So to wrap up everything with the series, I thought I would give you guys my personal favorite hero and heroine, and also give you my personal least favorite hero and heroine from this entire series. So my favorite hero, no surprise, is Giles from Thief of Shadows. We all know why. He's amazing. My favorite heroine is gonna have to be Alf from Duke of Pleasure. And it's funny because I didn't really expect to love her as much as I did, because she's featured in earlier books. I thought I was gonna like her. I wasn't really sure, but she's an icon. She's amazing. And then in terms of like my least favorite, I think Hero from Notorious Pleasures is my least favorite heroine. We already know why. In terms of my least favorite hero, don't hate me, but I'm torn between saying Raphael from Duke of Desire, but also I wasn't the biggest fan of Lazarus from Wicked Intentions. I think that's gonna be it for this vlog. Thank you so much if you got to this point in the video. I love you all so much. And thank you also to the people that requested that I do a reading vlog as opposed to just a review video. I had a lot of fun time filming this. Maybe not as much fun editing it, but I had a fun time filming it. Definitely leave me comments down below if you have questions about specific books in the series. Like I said, I already gave you guys my recommendations of what books I think are must-reads. Like I said, I still think you'd have a fun time if you read the entire series like I did. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!